The Seth Partnow tiers are out. We have a Jazz player in tier 5 and a Jazz player in tier 4. Who are they? Are they placed correctly? The great Tony Jones joins for the interview series. Who's his starting 5? It's different than mine. And what other things might he and I disagree with? It's all coming up next on Locked On Jazz.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider, and this is your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Today, we'll look at the beginning of Seth Partnow of the Athletics, the analytics great, tiers of players. He's releasing that. We'll walk through it with him this week. And then Tony Jones joins us. Who's his starting 5? Is he surprised about where the Jazz sit? How does John Collins fit in? We'll get into all those things with Tony Jones as the interview series kicks off. This is, as I mentioned, Locked On Jazz, and I am David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider, and this is your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. Everydayers, love you. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. YouTube, podcasting apps, free and available on all apps, on YouTube. 5-star reviews are greatly appreciated. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, the official sports book of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. All right, for those who have not done this with us before, everydayers will remember, this time of year, we kind of dive into an interview series. First segment, what's the latest? There's always news. Something's going on. We'll talk about it. And then second segment and third segment for the week will be Tony Jones. Next week, Sarah Todd. Hoping to have Ben Anderson. Hoping to have Thurl Bailey. Hoping to have Dan Clayton of Salt City Hoops. Hoping to have, we'll see, maybe Leaf. We'll see how it plays out. David James, always fun. Patrick Kinahan's great. So we'll see what plays out and who we have. And we'll roll this right up to kind of, it's August 15th. World Camp starts in 6 weeks. We'll roll that right up to that. Today and tomorrow we'll discuss the play-in tournament release, and then I think we'll get the schedule hopefully here at some point this week on Thursday or so. All right, Seth Partnow, who once worked in the front office of the Milwaukee Bucks. If you're in the numbers community, he's really well known, well thought of. Does his tiers, which I think is really great. We'll have other people rank their top 100 players. We can debate it. So he takes his 5 tiers of players. And, tier 1 is like the top 5 players in the NBA. And then tier 2 kind of gets into all-stars and all-star candidates. And then like top 40 is all-star candidates and top 20 is all-stars. And then he breaks it down from there. And it's 125 players he includes. And he points out that, like, hey, let's remember how this league works. 3 to 7 players perform at the level of a supermax. 3 to 7. 10 to 15 will end up playing at the level of 30% of the salary cap. 20 to 25 will perform at about 25% of the cap. 35 to 45 will present 20% of the cap. And 40 to 60 will perform at a level of 15% of the cap. That's okay. And those are the players that really, really, and he measures this in regards to kind of helping you win. And he actually really measures it as playoff wins more than regular season wins. He has a neat little note that he says the average NBA player will create a win every 485 to 490 minutes of time on the floor. So if you think about that, we go with 485. Someone averages 25 minutes a night. They create a win once every 19 games. Right? If you play 30 minutes a game, the average player is helping create a win every 16 games. Little tiny increments matter. So give you perspective, the last 5 players in this year were Grant Williams, who's now in Dallas, Gary Payton II, Jaden McDaniels, Jalen Green, and Markelle Fultz. So tier 5 is interesting. Tier 5 has a bunch of the veteran, older players who are still hanging on. Klay Thompson, Al Horford, Mike Conley, Russell Westbrook. Has D'Angelo Russell in there because he might just be a tier 5 player. And it has Scotty Barnes, who for all the Raptors fans' hopes is in tier 5. It also has Walker Kessler. So Walker Kessler comes in as a tier 5 player. Here are the centers that are also tier 5. Jonas Valanciunas, Clint Capella, Nikola Vucevic, Jakob Poeltl, and Zubac. What's your reaction to that? Chat room, feel free to jump in. Twitter or X, send me at DLock09. So Walker Kessler, after his rookie year, is already in. I think this is a great compliment to Walker. Maybe some of you think, well, he's way better than these guys. Probably not yet. Probably not contributing wins yet at a level beyond these guys. Jonas Valanciunas, Clint Capella, Nikola Vucevic, Jakob Poeltl, and Zubac. Now, could he? Sure. Will he? He's in his second year. There aren't many Benedict Mathurin, Walker Kessler, Paulo Banchero. There aren't many second-year players in Seth Partnow's tier of 125. So incredible accomplishment here by Walker to be in this group. And have him, and Valanciunas is a longtime stud, Capella, veteran, Vucevic, veteran, Poeltl. I mean, these are 10-year veterans who understand how to play in the NBA. Walker Kessler contributing the same amount of wins. I don't know what your first reaction to this is. My first reaction is this is incredibly complimentary to Walker, where he is as a second-year player, what a year he had, and we'll see whether he moves beyond this. But this is impressive. Into tier 4 is John Collins. Now, your first reaction anytime we hear anything about John Collins, well, that's because he had a bad year last year, he'll be better. Well, actually, what's really interesting about what Seth Partnow did, he's exactly the same as he has been in all of his other previous tiers. He just kept him the same. He doesn't seem to be impacted by John Collins' role in a manner that his offseason, he did a midseason tier last year. He dropped him and they put him back up this year. So who is he coupled with? He's coupled with Jeremy Grant, Tyler Hero, Bojan Bogdanovic, Zach LaVine, DeAndre Ayton. It's interesting about Zach LaVine in there. We talked about Zach LaVine as a potential trade level. He has him as a tier 4 player. The 4B bigs, by the way, just if we want to go back to Walker for a second, here are the bigs that are ranked higher than Walker Kessler. Brook Lopez, no question. He was unbelievable last year. Miles Turner, probably no question. So skilled offensively, doing a bunch of stuff. We'll see how is he. Nick Claxton, Jared Allen, who I think is a good comp. We'll see if Walker adds more offensive skill, but as of right now, probably similar. Karl Anthony Towns. Okay, right? So back to Walker being into the group with Jonas Valanciunas, Clint Capella, Vucevic, Poeltl, and Zubac, I think is a tremendous compliment to Walker. The next grouping of centers, Lopez, Turner, Nick Claxton, Jared Allen, Karl Anthony Towns, hard to quibble. At least I find myself not quibbling. Do you? Do you have a problem with that? Put it in the chat room if you do, because I don't. I think that's a fair estimation. In regards to John Collins, some of the other players in tier 4, he has superstar impact role players. That's what he's calling it. He calls tier 4 impact role players. And this is kind of 4C. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Bruce Brown, Alex Caruso, Marcus Smart. And then Reeves, Van Vliet, Maxey, and DeJounte Murray. John Collins is in that group. 4A, which is a little better than John Collins, according to Seth Partnow, is the super skilled or superstar role players. So Aaron Gordon, Andrew Wiggins, Derek White, OG Anunoby. Another player we talked about with trades, he sees as a Aaron Gordon type superstar role player. I would probably agree. If you're trading for OG Anunoby, looking for the bump, you're probably making a mistake. Then he has small guards in there, CJ McCollum, CP3, and Darius Garland. Surprised to see Darius Garland in that group. And then he has elite shooters, Michael Porter Jr., Desmond Bane, and Porzingis. So if you have an elite skill, an elite role, an elite like little guard kind of aspect to you, you go into 4A. Otherwise, you're in 4C or 4, which is John Collins, and 4B was that kind of list of bigs. Pretty accurate. We'll keep an eye on it. I don't know that we're seeing another Jazz player to Lowry. I'm not sure that Jordan Clarkson made the top 125. Because if Jordan Clarkson didn't get into one of these Austin Reeves, Fred VanVleet, Tyrese Maxey, DeJounte Murray groups, I'm thinking that Jordan Clarkson did not make the top 125 unless I missed him, which is interesting. All right, Tony Jones is next. We'll have our usual frolicking fun and continue with him. Today's show is brought to you in part by our friends over at Murdoch Hyundai, located at 4646 South State Street, also located in Logan and in Linden. We have 2 Santa Fe's in our house. One of them is at college with one kid. One's going to be at college with the other kid. And then I'm driving the Ioniq 5. I actually get the Ioniq back now. The kids are going to college. So that's the good part about it. Otherwise, I'm pretty broken. And so we own 3 of them. So I'm not just making this up. Ever since I got to know Blake, and then I coupled with Hyundai, and then I did the research about Hyundai and the value I got for the dollar, that's the car I've been buying. I'll tell you this. If you do the research and say, okay, what do I get for the dollar? Hyundai's got to be on your list. Then you can decide whether it looks right, whether it fits you, all those kind of things, whether there's somebody else but I would strongly suggest you at least include Hyundai in your search. And if you do, email me first at dlock09@gmail.com, and I'll set you up with a VIP meeting either in Logan or in Linden or at Murray at 4646 South State Street. You get more for the buck. You also end up with the Murdoch guarantee of a no regrets experience. It's all at Murdoch Hyundai, located 4646 South State Street, Logan or Linden. Email me first at dlock09@gmail.com. Today's show is brought to you in part also by FanDuel. Football season is here, about to kick off, and FanDuel is giving you a chance to win all season long. Because right now, when you bet a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. Just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you get bonus bets for every victory. Spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel Sportsbook, by the way, also has a bunch of NBA props that are already up and available for you. Over-under wins on the season are available for you, as well as Rookie of the Year, obviously Victor Wembanyama. Opening night odds, even though those games have not been officially announced, the Warriors are a 1.5 favorite over the Suns. Denver's a 5.5 point favorite over the Lakers. Sounds as though people are pretty comfortable that October 25th is Victor Wembanyama's debut. They're a 5.5 point dog against Dallas. And that Milwaukee opens up against Philadelphia on the 26th. They have the Christmas Day games as well. Nothing yet from the big 3. They also have FIBA World Cup odds if you want to get involved. USA is -110 to win it. Canada is second at +420. It's all at FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Well, now the show got way better. TJ, Tony Jones, what's up?
What's up, my guy? How are you?
I'm great. Let's dig in. This is going to be fun. Tony's with us all week. Are you surprised that if this is who the Utah Jazz are? Seems like I don't think they're going to do something else. Probably would have seen it. Are you surprised that this is who the Utah Jazz seem to be heading to training camp with on thereabouts October 1st?
No, not at all. I think other than being a third team in the Damian Lillard trade, there are no moves to be made at this point. And, and this is what the Jazz, this is a macro thing for the Jazz, right? Because what they want is a bunch of expiring contracts in order to try and, potentially take advantage of the offseason next season, which is free agency, which is, being in a trade market. And, this is, this was I don't want to say carefully crafted, but, this roster was crafted to, have a lot of flexibility going forward. So, I would expect, the Jazz to try and be as competitive as possible this year. And, they're still in a bit of fact finding. They obviously have the 3 rookies that they drafted. So, integrating those 3 guys, particularly Keontae George and Taylor Hendricks is going to be, a storyline for the season. And obviously the growth of Lauri Markkanen and Walker Kessler and Ochai Agbaji that's going to be another storyline for the season as well. So, there are a lot of ways I think the season can go, but I think the one direction that the Jazz want to go is towards being competitive as possible.
All right, so explain that to me, because if I'm listening, I heard two different things. I heard that this year was perfectly constructed to be able to do something next year, to be available for that, and yet at the same time you're saying it's to be competitive now. And maybe we have to define what competitive now means, but how can both of those be true at the same time?
Well, I mean, both of those are true at the same time. I mean, you can be competitive, with a roster that has flexibility going forward, right? You can be competitive with a young roster. You can be competitive, with an inexperienced roster. And competitive, as I define it, as I see it, is I think the Jazz want to make the playoffs. And, they're going to try as hard as possible to make the playoffs, or to play in or the playoffs. I personally think that they can be a team anywhere from 6th in the West to 11th in the West, because I think that they have some obvious advantages, but they also have some obvious disadvantages. But when I say fact finding, right, you want to find out if Colin Sexton can be a point guard long term. You want to find out if Keontae George can be not only a point guard long term, but a star long term. You want to find out if last year for Lauri Markkanen was the case of a guy having an All-NBA season, or is this who Lauri Markkanen is? We want to find out. The Jazz want to find out if Walker Kessler did he just have a really good rookie season, or is he a perennial all defense candidate, somebody like that? Obviously you take John Collins, you want to integrate John Collins. There's a lot of talent and flexibility and athleticism on the roster. So even if the Jazz are trying to figure out who they are to some degree long term, they can still win and be competitive as possible while doing so.
So the obvious answer to this question is Lauri Markkanen. And maybe the second most obvious question to answer this is Walker Kessler. To some extent, I'm kind of moving them off the board. So I'll share with you that Colin Sexton, to me, is the player who I have more hope for and positivity toward by the end of the year than I had at the beginning of the year last year. Like if you asked me in the first 10, 15 games of the year about Colin Sexton, I'd have just been like, gosh, so skilled. But you ask me now, I'm like so skilled, and like, if you understand this, now I got to give Will Hardy credit. There's a little bit of like Will Hardy's whole talk to us of like, hey, embrace the superpower. Like he always used to talk about that, right? In our press conference, like, tell me what he can do, not what he can't do. And I certainly was that. Like in the first 15, 20 games of the year, can't run an offense, can't make a quick decision, can't do this, can't do that. By the last 50 games, oh my gosh, that first step is as good as any first step in the NBA. You put him off the ball, you get him the ball quickly, you let him attack. Oh, that's bona fide. Like I actually am more of a believer in Colin Sexton today than maybe I was of any other player. Like Lowry, I thought would be good and he became great. Walker, I just didn't know. So, but like I might have been negative on Colin Sexton and now positive. What's your vibe on Colin Sexton?
I think he's emblematic of, is emblematic the right word?
Might be. I don't know what you're going to say.
I think that he defines the Jazz roster as an individual.
Interesting. Explain. That is the correct word, TJ. Your mom, the journalism professor who is not just the dean of the journalism school at Morgan State. Is that right?
She is the dean of journalism at Morgan State University. Yes.
Yes. So she gets a shout out on every one of these shows that we do together. I just want to
shout out Jackie Jones.
Yes. I've never met her. When she comes to a game, if you don't introduce me, I'm pissed. As well as I need to like, I like greatness. I'm obsessed with meeting greatness. Your mom classifies. So Jackie Jones, now explain in essay form that Jackie Jones would approve of why Colin Sexton is emblematic of the Utah Jazz roster.
So in the previous question, one of my answers was the Jazz as a roster have some really obvious advantages and they have some obvious disadvantages. The obvious advantages in my eyes could get them all the way to 6th in the West. The obvious disadvantages in my eyes can get them all the way down to 11th in the West.
I can get them to, by the way, I can get them to 13th. You're being
I
nice.
can get them to 11th because I think the obvious advantages.
Portland, San Antonio, Houston, and who?
I don't know. I think the obvious advantages are so obvious that I think that there's only so far that they can fall. But when you look at Colin Sexton, right, the obvious advantages, there aren't many people in the league that can keep him in front of him. He's puts more rim pressure. He puts more pressure on the rim by a mile than any other guard on the roster. He can get to the mid range. He has a floater. I think he's an improving shooter. I don't know whether the stats say it or not, but I think he's an improving shooter. I think he's an improving confident shooter. And he's figured out ways to be impactful, right? So that to me, at the end of the day.
Can I jump in?
Yeah,
did he figure out ways, or did Will Hardy figure out how to make him impact?
Well, I think it was a collaborative because I think that Will Hardy coached him tough, but Colin Sexton allowed Will Hardy to coach him tough. And the NBA level, that's a big thing. A player has to allow you to coach him the way that Will Hardy coached Colin Sexton. And Colin Sexton deserves a lot of credit for that, for being coachable. So for me, Colin Sexton right now, at the very worst, is a 6-man, a really good 6-man in the NBA. So what does he have to do to be better than that? What does he, because if you ask Colin Sexton, and I'll say this, I talked to Colin Sexton over the weekend, one-on-one. And when I talked to him one-on-one, and there's a story coming out in The Athletic about it, when I talked to him one-on-one this weekend on Saturday, he was like, Tony, I'm a starter. Tony, I'm a starter. Tony, I'm a starter. Tony, I'm a starter. Like the entire time, Tony, I'm a starter. And he looks at himself as a starter. So what does he have to do to be a starter? Because he's an imperfect player. The reads have to get better. The defense has to get a lot better, right? Like he's never going to be a stopper, but he's got to be competitive, okay? Right. The one thing that I love about
he might have to grow 2 inches, which would be really hard.
Really hard. Okay, but so Stephen Curry was really bad defensively early in his career. And he became average defensively, right? And competitive defensively because he became competitive. And Colin Sexton has to be competitive defensively. And I think he thinks he's competitive defensively, but he has to actually be competitive defensively. So, I mean, that's kind of getting into the weeds, but he's got to be better defensively. The reads have to be better. I don't want to say it's about an IQ, but just the feel of running a team that has to come along. So if Colin Sexton, like right now, there's a hole at the point guard spot, right? And there's a pool of 5 guys that you can go in and you can say, hey, these 5 guys can be your starting point guard at the beginning of the year. If Colin Sexton wants to be that guy, then some of those things have to improve. But there are some things that he does that nobody else on the roster can do in terms of the athleticism from the backcourt, the ability to finish at the rim, his competitiveness. Like I think his competitiveness is his defining trait. And I think the rest of the lineup could use a shot of his competitiveness. Like Jordan Clarkson is a competitive guy, but he's often an understated guy. So is Lauri Markkanen. So is Walker Kessler. So has John Collins been in Atlanta. That starting lineup, you put Colin Sexton in that starting lineup, you put his competitiveness in that starting lineup, and that's something unique to the rest of the starting lineup. The rim pressure from the guard spot, that's something unique to the rest of the starting lineup. The ability to create with the front court that the Jazz are projected to start, that's something unique to the starting lineup. But he also has to bring other things for that to work as well.
I cringed and facially people will saw it if they're watching on YouTube. When you said, like, I'm a starter, because I love him as a sixth man who finishes, not as a starter. That was why I gave that face reaction. But it leads to the most interesting question. Who is the Jazz? Or what is the Jazz starting five? We will do that next with Tony Jones. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps as well as on YouTube. Comment section is flying because they all love TJ. You can read him at The Athletic. Tony Jones. Do I notice that you may be nominated for Muscle Watch?
I was not nominated for Muscle Watch.
I don't know.
I'm a runner now, man.
I know. What's the weight loss?
I don't know yet. I haven't really. I mean, I've stepped on the scale. I don't want to say yet. I want to just show up at camp with like 5% body fat and say, that I gained 10 miles.
Camp is like in 6 weeks.
Yeah, I got 6 weeks, man.
5% body fat?
Yeah.
We're old.
5% body fat in my left forearm.
Okay, good. We're good. Now you got it. We're good. I put the weight thing in. It tells me that I'm like obese, like BMI obese. I'm like, come on now, man.
That's ridiculous. Don't ever trust BMI.
The other one that I love is
you'll end up anorexic.
I was listening to a podcast this summer because this is what I do now about longevity, and it was about sugar. And it said, like, hey, if you cut sugar, you add like 7 years to your life, like almost immediately. I'm exaggerating slightly. So I was like, all right, well, I'm pretty healthy. I live a good life. I'm super fortunate. Like, I got all the advantages. I got good genetics. Like, I got a decent chance to hit like 85. Like, that's probably like round about my expect. So I get 92. And I was like, yeah, I don't want another 42 years without sugar. Like, I'll take 35 with, thanks. 42 without, I'm not even on that.
Can you afford to live till 92?
Fair question.
Because I actually thought about this the other day. Like, I want to live till 90. But I don't know that I can afford to live till 90. I might run out of money at like 78.
Right. Well, it would mean that my worst parenting line, which is when my kids want something, I'm like, I don't think I'm dying broke. So you decide whether you want it now or later. Wouldn't work if I run out of money because then I would die broke. What is the Jazz starting five?
So are you putting me on the spot and saying, hey, pick a starting five?
I've been on the spot. I've given out my starting five. I'll give mine. I think it's Clarkson, Agbaji, Markkanen, Collins, Kessler.
I don't think you can start that lineup.
Why not?
There's only one ball handler in that lineup.
So Kelly Olynyk starts instead of John Collins to get my second ball handler?
You could do that.
I love John Collins playing second team players. Like, I'm a huge fan of that.
Yeah, but you can. I don't think you want to do. I think John's too dynamic for that. So I think you start John, and the advantage of starting John and Lowry is that you could stagger one of those against second team guys.
Okay. If you go with a different line, okay. By the way, I just want to point out, I did not disagree. I did not disagree with Tony. The flaw in my lineup is you're right. There's only one ball handler in that lineup. There are at least 4 shooters with Walker, Kessler on the floor. You cannot have another non-shooter.
And there's one ball handler.
I don't think you can play Chris Dunn.
There's also only half a passer in that lineup.
Right, Kelly. So the problem when I did our rotations, and I wanted to have 4 shooters, multiple ball handlers, and multiple passers, and I wanted to have defenders, is that Ochai Agbaji and Kelly Olynyk both played 48 minutes. Which was a problem because neither of them could do that. So let's play here because this gets interesting. So I don't disagree with you, but I would like to hear your solution rather than Jordan Clarkson, Ochai Agbaji, Lowry Markkanen, John Collins, and Walker Kessler.
See, I think with your lineup, I think the advantage of your lineup is I actually think that's Utah's best 5 players.
Interesting.
Well, not with John Collins in the lineup. Clarkson, Agbaji, Collins, Kessler, Markkanen.
Yeah.
I think if you say, are these our best 5 players? I think that those are the best 5 players.
Okay.
And I think that, the obvious one that I think Jazz fans will quibble with me about is Agbaji. But I challenge you to find guys that can guard 1, 2, 3s, maybe even some 4s in the pinches, switch through the lineup, then come down, hit threes, and be as athletic as he is in transition. I'm just talking about fit. So, but I don't think you can start that lineup.
I've heard that. I'm waiting still for the next version.
Come on now.
Here, right? I got other topics to get to about most significant move and John Collins. We're not heading toward those right now.
I get it. So I think I would pick Chris Dunn.
Can you play Chris Dunn and Walker Kessler, two non-shooters at the same time?
Yes, because Chris Dunn has a floater. If you go under Chris Dunn's screen, he showed last year that he's just going to keep dribbling, keep his dribble alive until he gets to his 10-footer, and then he's money there.
So I'll be honest, I didn't have Chris Dunn. I loved Chris Dunn, and one of my most enjoyable moments of the year last year was a conversation I had with Chris Dunn in the weight room in maybe Miami about his journey, and I'm just such a Chris Dunn fan. I actually didn't have him in the rotation.
I think that there's I think I wouldn't quibble with that. I think there's a chance that Chris Dunn is the starting point guard on opening night. I think there's a chance that he's the 15th man on opening night. I think that's how far his pendulum swings. But I would consider Chris Dunn as a starter for a couple of reasons. Number one, he's by far the best defender out of any of the guards right now. Like, it's not even close.
So are you playing Jordan Clarkson and Colin Sexton together on the second unit?
No, I'm starting Jordan Clarkson at the 2.
So you're not starting Ochai Agbaji?
No.
And then Chris Dunn is guarding your best offensive player on the other team at all times?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, no, he's guarding your best offensive guard. I'm challenging Lauri Markkanen to guard your best forwards. Because I'm like, Lauri Markkanen, you're my all-NBA guy. Go out and guard.
And so you're then Colin Sexton and Ochai Agbaji are your second unit?
That's your second unit.
And who's so Kelly Olynyk, is your one ball handler in that lineup?
Sexton.
I just was poking.
Listen, I'm
just having fun. So you have Talen Horton-Tucker out of the rotation?
I would probably
and you have Keontae George, and you have Keontae George out of the rotation.
I would have Keontae George in the rotation, Talen Horton-Tucker out of the rotation.
So the only way you have Talen Horton-Tucker the only way you have Keontae George in the rotation is if Ochai Agbaji is playing Lauri Markkanen's backup 3 minutes.
Yeah, but Ochai Agbaji. So Colin Sexton, the 6th man, Ochai Agbaji, the 7th man. Either or, you can flip those two, depending on the need. Keontae, the 9th man, Olynyk. So let's think.
It's tricky. Like I did a bunch of shows on this. It's super tricky.
There's so many rotational players on this roster. I think that's actually one of the Jazz's advantages.
And then back to where we were a second ago, and like record, if they can stay tight in the first set, they're at a pretty big disadvantage against most teams starting 5s, right? Like if you depending,
I don't know about that.
Most of our starters are below league average.
I don't know that. I don't know that I agree with that.
Okay.
I think flat out the Jazz have one of the most talented front courts in the league. They got a big
statement about. All right, let's get to John Collins. How does John Collins? Then you see John. I don't need to ask your most significant move if you see that. You clearly see it as John Collins. So how does John Collins fit in?
Well, I mean, you start him, and you go out and play him. I mean, you're going to have to integrate him. It's going to take 20 or so games to integrate him into how the Jazz want to play and how Will Hardy wants to play. But I mean, he's somebody
playing the 4, playing the 5.
He plays a 4. Walker plays a 5. Lauri plays a 3.
Who's your backup 5?
Kelly Olynyk. You run Kelly.
I like John Collins as my backup 5 because I can run pick and roll with him, but everyone will switch it.
Yeah, but I don't like John Collins as your backup 5 because he's got to defend the backup 5.
Well, I agree, and so that's why I have him. That's why I said earlier that I love John Collins on second units.
I mean, and then it's the same thing with Kelly. Kelly has to defend it as well, but I think Kelly's a better defender than John is.
So I think Kelly Olynyk's probably the player in the league that's better than most people realize. The one real deficiency is he's just not a good rebounder.
Yeah, but I mean, you're going to be playing him. I mean, John Collins is either going to be on the floor or Larry Markin is going to be on the floor. Both of those guys are plus rebounders to me.
Because I thought I heard you kind of give me a lineup that might be a little Colin Sexton, Keontae George, Ochai Agbaji, John Collins, Kelly Olynyk second unit, and that one makes me nervous about rebounding.
How does it make you? How does it make you feel in transition?
I like it because it's 5 out and it lets Colin Sexton and Keontae George get downhill.
Yep. There's going to be advantages and there are going to be disadvantages. I think the Jazz as a whole are one of the most athletic teams in the league. I think the Jazz as a whole are one of the worst passing rosters in the league.
I opened last year.
What's going to win out?
Right. I opened last year. If you go back and listen to Locked On Jazz last year on the first day of training camp, the comment I made, Will Hardy's biggest challenge is going to get somebody to pass on this because this might have been before he traded for Kelly. I was like, we do not literally have anyone on this roster who passes the basketball.
Kelly Olynyk's the best passer on this team by a good margin.
Let's start Kelly. Hey, I was in the hotel in Toronto and Kelly was walking through going, point Kelly, point Kelly, point Kelly after they traded Conley. Let's just let Kelly start a point guard. We're going to go 6'10".
He's a great passer.
He is great.
You know who the second best passer on the roster is? It's Keontae George.
Oh, that's interesting. All right, more with Tony Jones tomorrow. We'll get into the rookies, what they're going to do. I have my little up my sleeve difficult question for Tony. It's right here. We'll have that tomorrow on Locked On Jazz. TJ's back. Join us for it. It's all here on Locked On Jazz, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making us your first listen, and thank you for being an everydayer to Locked On Jazz. Kales.